Okay, let me welcome you to the conversation segment of the Signature Show this Sunday. You know, for about 2 weeks running, we've been raising certain issues around our polity and our politics. In one of the episodes, we asked the question, what manner of president does Nigeria need in 2023? We had that conversation with Dr. Ago. Today, we raise what some people may consider a little contentious. A president of Southeast extraction. The question we raise today is, why is it an issue? Now, there are those who say that there is a gentleman's understanding that the presidency should go around the country. There are others who say that that gentleman's understanding has created problems of real development for the country because since it is a turn, mediocres could have their way. Yet the conversation is not ending as to a president of Southeast extraction. This afternoon, I have a friend, a lawyer, an activist, a technocrat, Dr. Sam Amadi, conversing with me. Dr. Amadi, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you very much.
You see the question, you hear the question I raised. A president of Southeast extraction. Why is it an issue? Indeed, should it be an issue?
Well, let's say, why should it be an issue? And say, why is this issue? First, I think if we go back a little bit, back in history to maybe, I think, 2004, and from 2002, 2004, 2007, Chief Ojo Madekwe, around about that time in the first tenure, I think, of President Obasanjo, when he was Minister for Culture and Tourism, I think, we addressed some Igbo gathering in Lagos and made use an unfortunate word which continued to haunt him. So he says, an Igbo presidency is idiotic. And when I confronted much later, when I became a special advisor and as foreign affairs and confronted with the idea, it came out that he meant that Igbo, we need a Nigerian president of Igbo extraction. But many Igbos didn't forgive him even until he died because of the dismissive way he treated the notion of Igbo president. And of course, there are many philosophical basis for which Ojo may have made that, seemingly dismissive remark. One is that we know that presidency of a country is an office that has general responsibility. So the Constitution envisages that nobody becomes a president except he is endorsed by not just a majority, but almost all the segments of the country. So when you talk about a quarter of 2/3 states, it means that he's going to have, he or she will have significant acceptability across the country. So in that sense, whoever emerges is actually in reality a Nigerian president because Nigerians have all elected him and he owes that responsibility to all Nigerians. And part of the presidential oath of office, as well as for other public officials, is to discharge this job with his duties of his office without being unduly overburdened by considerations of ethnic, religious, or other social partisanship. But what happened in reality, and maybe more so since 2014, has been the use of presidential power as an exclusionary instrument, in which case, even though a president, more or less, emerges as president because he gets this 2/3 spread, reckons himself as a president of maybe whatever you call 75, 95, or 97 of 100. And then conceptually reduces the 3 or 5%, depending on what the arithmetic is, of the rest of the country to a subservient status of exclusion. So that conception of accountability, presidential accountability, of presidential responsibility, generates, as it were, a counter response of this, this ownership will disown you. So they
You are not our president.
Our president. Now, so what that generates in the long term is a quest for our president. So, by era of commission omission, the Nigerian state has now been governed in a manner that suggests to everybody that in 4 or 8 years, you will have your chance to have the president for yourself. Take the bulk of it and give the rest to us. So every part of the Nigerian assemblage is into a competitive race to make sure
They have
their
a piece of
chance.
the cake.
And when there's an obstruction, or so it's not like a case of democracy being a matter of majority rule. It's not a case of democracy being a matter of, group interchanging positions. So even if you're minority or majority, you reckon that you should have an opportunity, because it's the consequence of not being a president, of your zone not president, is that you're going to suffer. It's almost a case of an existential crisis for you. It's a matter of existence. If you don't get that big position, you are done. So the question is, why does it matter? It matters now because at the level of political psychology, and this is where people make mistake. Some of us technocrats and scholars and progressives and all kinds of self-proclaimed intellectuals dismiss the common sentiment of our president. So people say, what's the real value of an able president to Igbo socio-economic development? Maybe not much, considering the value of a Yoruba presidency in Obasanjo's 8 years to Yoruba socio-economic development, or the value of a Buhari presidency in 7 to 8 years of Buhari presidency to the northeast, northwest, the kind of diminution in human capital we are seeing, in human development, the kind of decay that arguably returns that zone to pre-1980, some may argue. So then you fall into this temptation to discount the public sentiment around ownership of the presidency. But if you know that politics is largely a psychology thing, people, so it's not about the technicalities of development. It's not about politics as development. It's about the psychology of power, that we feel that part of the abstract notion of being a citizen, of citizenship, the component of citizenship ordinarily is political freedom, economic freedom, social inclusion. So you're a citizen because you have those Chapter 4 rights, okay, and you really enjoy them. You're a citizen because you have the Chapter 2 rights, which are the socio-economic rights, so you are not excluded in participating in the economy. You're not unequally protected by law. So really, do you really care about where the president comes from? So like in the US today, we've got presidents who have come from maybe one side, mostly from the south, okay, rather than from the northeast, the intellectual capital. And people are not worried. Why are they not worried? Because the definition of citizenship in the US is not reliant on belonging to the ethnic group roots. So whether it's social, religious, cultural, or ethnic, to that of the president. So nobody cares that Texas, in fact, a family has produced 2 presidents, 2 governors, 2 a senator, Supreme Court justice of the state, an attorney general running for attorney general. So they have produced almost everything, one family. And people are really not bothered, because the structure of society and the incidence of governance and access resources are not, so it matters because of the psychology of power.
Let me create this elevated intellectual perception of this presidency and where it comes from. Let us check the reality. Obasanjo, as you did allude to while we were just conversing now, was Nigeria's president for 8 years. Let me go back. Babangida was Nigeria's military president for a long time. Abdulsalam Abubakar, right? Sadana of Sokoto was governor of northern Nigeria. Tafawa Balewa, I'll soon come back to him, was the the prime minister of Nigeria. Awolowo was premier. I want you to go to Ijebu-Ode. I want you to go to Nsukka, where Zik lived. I want you to go to Mina, where Babangida and Abdulsalam Abubakar still live. I want you to go to Daura, that has produced a president. Can you please go to Abeokuta, that has also produced a president? Can you go to Sokoto Shagari, that has also produced a president in this country? Is there any comparative developmental advantage those locations have enjoyed as a result of producing a president? And therefore, why this clamor for an Igbo president?
Obviously, not much, if any. Now, take Abeokuta, for example. I know that as soon as, I don't know what it is now, but as soon as Obasanjo left office, the road connecting Lagos to Ogun State, was impassable, totally collapsed. And it was the president who was very powerful for 8 years. We do know that the East-West Road
under Goodluck Jonathan
is still being a proposition. It's going on. He couldn't complete it. He couldn't finish off the amnesty. The Ogoni reclamation has not completed. So you can argue really that this is what they call a forced necessity, a forced narrative that if you have the president, they will gain more than ever a person. It might not be. Again, the real issue here is that elites benefit, and proximity to people in power is an elitist game. So what does that mean? That if as a president when Obasanjo was there, Martin, his in-law, was involved in power. Some people argue that what is now called the civil defense today came because Obasanjo was somebody close to him had his franchise, designed something and put there, and what civil defense that probably shouldn't have been in existence came. So there are going to be those meets that people get because of proximity. And in a much more networked society like ours, modern age, your closest friends and colleagues don't need to come for your state. So you can see under Obasanjo and Anduba playing big. You see under Jonathan, Hassan Tuko, who was instrumental to multiple appointments, and maybe under President Buhari, we don't know yet. We might get to hear another shadow Igbo or Yoruba or Efik or Ijo person who is enjoying more access to power.
It was an elite game.
So the zoning stuff is it's our turn. It's an elitist game. It helps elites capture political power. So arguably, if the notion that the power should have shifted to the north didn't gain credence, Jonathan would have made it in spite of his usual 10 million votes. Those 5 million that he added to was because a large proportion of PDP's north, the north was mostly PDP in spite of Buhari's consistent good run. He couldn't close the deal. But those PDP northerners were angered by the fact that Jonathan continued and didn't hand over power. And many of them moved away. A few of them undermined the ticket, even from inside. So you can see the elites are the champions of politics of sharing and of politics of turn by turn, because it's about them. So when the Sarakis, the northern leaders, articles felt that Jonathan will not agree to the zoning, and that would affect their chances, they changed game and brought Buhari. So they joined forces, the NPDP and the ACN and others came together and created what we have today as the Buhari presidency. One can bet that without that shift, Buhari couldn't have been president with his sizable, overwhelming, if you like, on an usual basis, overwhelming support of the northern Talakawas. But he got in because there was this elite shift caused by the politics of zoning power. So at the level of elite contention, competition, for access to resource, it matters to them. At the level of real development, it does not matter. What matters for real development is actually devolution of power, is actually local governance, strengthening accountability at the local level. And I've always argued, I tell my fellow Igbos, look, if you have three, it's always better conceptually to have three MIORA in the Southeast and a Southern presidency twice. Why? Because we have even as Nigerian power constitution is so centralized, there's still enough space for a visionary manager like Emma Wara, who probably is Africa's greatest technocrat, demonstrable, who took Southeast from a latecomer to a top performer. In a one burst of energy, they closed the huge gap of IGR between the Southwest and Southeast. In one burst of energy, he made Southeast a top performer in education. Over 40% was invested in education. The Emmanuel government first in Nigeria set up public libraries. First in Nigeria, public government aid schools. Most of the schools in the West you hear about are missionary schools, St. Finbar's, St. Gregory, blah, blah. But Emmanuel started building the first National College in BC, all those schools you see, built by MI government. So, and of course, the whole world said the Southeast economy was the fastest growing in the world in the 1963. Now, MI's magic was to localize interventions. It was to create a system of intervention that catered to resource maximization in the local area. So for me, really, what is developmentally more impactful is restructuring that allows greater optimization of resources and greater control of resources and more accountability at the local level. The example from China, where you see coevolution, the Chinese model, people don't know, is democratic at the grassroots. At the upper level, meritocrat. So you see these CCPC chieftains coming there on merit. But at the local level, democracy. So that's actually the point, that development is a function of accountability and efficiency at the local level. But what is happening with the post-over zoning is that elite politics, elite contention, number one. Two, the psychology of power. So people feel excluded. People feel, oh, the North has had it, the Southwest has had it, South has it. So we in this geopolitics called Southeast. So does that suggest some second-class citizenship? Does that suggest that we are now, we have dropped, we have moved from one of the top three to now inconsequential? So that is the trigger for agitation. That's what I call political psychology. And more often, it's more important. People talk about conflicts. Conflicts, if you look at the history of conflicts all over the world, they don't have reasonable objective basis. People,
sometimes emotional.
Emotional. So we talk about conflict entrepreneurship. People manipulate. People walk around this notion of nationalism, this notion of dignity, and transmute it into a grievance.
Yeah, Dr. Amadi, just use the word now. This notion of dignity. There are a number of people in the social media who will tell you that the Igbo person in central institutions, federal government institutions, are disrespected on account of their having not produced a president. And that the issues in these institutions that are judged against the Igbo person just on account of the fact that there has not been an Igbo president. That if the South-East produces an Igbo president, maybe the institutions of the federal government will also begin to give to the Igbo person his due. Can't these institutions function as they ought to without the body language of who produces the president?
Absolutely correct. Now, you made a good point about, there's a sense in which there's the Igbo persons under siege in contemporary Nigeria. The rhetoric of inconsequentialism or inconsequentialism that Buhari launched by virtue of 9-3 and DOT, all these, you see, presidents have the power of communication. That's the thing that defines the president. What they now call bully pulpit. The president uses his language. Benjamin Disraeli, the Prime Minister of Britain, said, with words we govern.
Create a people.
Yes, so we say with words we govern people. So the president's communication can change a whole thing. The parent can create inclusion or create exclusion. The parent can suggest to people that they are not reckoned as mainstream. Or the parent can take a fringe people and mainstream them through language. So President Buhari's rhetoric fits into this trope of exclusion and victimization in two ways. One, it suggests to the average Igbo person that he is not considered mainstream. He's seen as outlier, different. These Biafrans, you saw when this crisis of IPOB by the federal government, some Nigerian institutions begin to Biafranize
even their own
Igbos, all their citizens. And by Biafranizing them, you are placing them on a category of citizenship that is object of ridicule and antagonism. Hate speech, that's what we call hate speech. So hate speech means you profile the people and put them in a particular bucket where they are not within the reach of state protection, rule of law. The incident that happened at the phone village, GSM at that plaza.
Yes.
With the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal. And he was harassed. And it turned out it was not an Igbo man. It wasn't a Southeasterner. But when he was giving his report, he says, even in the press statement of his special advice assistant, he says, those Biafra boys. Now, what that means is that you are unleashing state coercive terror. He says, these enemies, these terrorists. So you have framed the people. And that's why some of us felt that, placing IPOB as a terror group had a collateral damage on the Southeast. But what that means is that since you don't know who is an IPOB person in a precise sense, there's no register of names where it's okay, this is IPOB, and you know that they are mostly youths from the Southeast. So the temptation to see all Southeasterners as IPOB and therefore terrorists is very rife. So that's why this very critical use of language, imagery, symbolisms by official, presidential or state policy or communication is very important. That's what has created this siege of the Southeast. Now we saw the police, ex-police officer who terrorized an ordinary person who bought property, market transaction in Kano. So we've seen what happened in the church where the priest says, "Oh, it's too much of you guys." Ordinarily the Catholic Church is a very sober and well-managed institution, but we saw the fracture caused by this demonization, this profiling. So the use of official communication to profile the people, to suggest inferiority, to suggest humiliation, works the other way around to instigate and inspire anger and a less than rational, if you like, fervor to get a presidential seat. So it's like a magic bullet. Some Igbos will not think, or some Easterners will think, just get a presidency, then we deflate and demobilize this, bubble of inferiority and of victimization. But that's not real. That's not real.
If the Igbo, the Southeast, get that presidency, can it solve this image, this demonization, this tendency to be lowered as a citizen, as a Nigerian citizen in national institutions?
It can solve in one sense, because it's a psychological bubble. It's deflated. So a bubble is a symbol. A bubble created by a symbol is destroyed by a symbol. So if you see the image of a Southeastern president, commander-in-chief, and doing well, then it recreates the sense that we are part of this equation. That's why it's psychological, and it's important. And that's why in in plural societies, arrangements are made to create diversity. The idea, like Trump, Biden says, want to have a Supreme Court that looks like all of us, is that when people look at the Supreme Court and they see a Caucasian, they see a Latino, they see a black man, they see a black woman,
and this is
it confers legitimacy on that institution. Oh, this is us speaking to us. This is us making rules for us. We'll go to the parliament and we'll see the man from Enugu East, the one from Adamawa North, the one from Calabar South, the one from Yoruba, Lagos East, all in chamber. It's just, this is the people's house. And that's Very important political issue. Then we come to the executive, and that's why I said the Buhari presidency largely created this unusual competition, unusual passion for presidency, because it did what nobody did. PDP had a history. You can accuse PDP of competence or incompetence. You can say they're corrupt or not corrupt, but you can't accuse them of not being national. Under PDP, Obasanjo's 8 years and Yar'Adua's and Jonathan, you saw very careful effort to reflect that diversity in the executive branch of government. So you have a president under Obasanjo who was a Yoruba. You had a secretary to government who was cross-Siberian or Akwa Ibomite from the north, south. You had a chief of staff who was far north, a former general, consequential position. You had a speaker, the Senate president was a southeasterner. You had, so everybody shared in government, structure of government. That's what political scientists call socialism. That means a system where you bring people, negotiate power, and create diversity and balance and shared power. And that's what I've been promoted. That alternative to zoning is shared power. Again, I'll come to that. But so, Yar'Adua did the same thing. He had somebody who acted like chief of staff. The principal secretary was David from the South. He had his vice from Bayelsa. He had secretary of government. Everything was spread out. Jonathan called that process. He had his chief of staff. He had from different places, secretary of government, different places, vice president, president.
So it was a Nigerian government.
In Nigerian government. Now, I think the Buhari error, whether intentional or idiosyncratic, was to scramble this and get the presidency that was too personalized and therefore sectionalized by default. But if you personalize something, they're going to deal with people I know, people I trust. And then in that architecture of power, especially the security architecture, that's important for a country that's suffering so much, propaganda, conspiracy of Islamization, of Fularization. The first thing that you want to be sure is security, that people trust the instrument of state power. And then in constituting that security apparatus, you deliberately or absent-mindedly excluded almost half of the country. The Christian community was missing at the high point. The South was largely missing. So you reverse that architecture that supports diversity and inclusion and therefore social trust.
You create this agitation.
So that increases. So we now feel if 10 people are killed in Ugoja, for example, or in Abia State, for example, and we didn't see immediate response from the Inspector of Police, we didn't see SSS, and stories start coming that, they were taken to the DSSS, I let them lose because it's a Fulani, because it's a Muslim, then people will not say, wow. So I've met as a lawyer, I've met young people, case I'm handling, and when you tell them, say, look, we're going to make sure justice is done. Say, which justice? So they have a closed mind that this system is designed, managed against us. So in that system, the only option is zero sum. Either we have that presidency or we have nothing. And so what we are saying then is, people who are marginalized like the Southeast, at least in recent times, when there's a sense of injury, then if you're going to it's legitimate to use political instrument, again, power, to say, okay, let's reassure this sector by giving them this opportunity. What that does, that since everybody has got it, southwest, southwest, north, if they have that opportunity, then you have defeated the psychology of exclusion. That is what created June 12. I was in June 12 when it happened. I was one of the lawyers who was also agitating. I was lawyer to Tyson Arena. I was lawyer to the founder of OPC, Dr. What's his name? The who died, yeah. I was his lawyer. I did most of the cases with Gary 5 years as a lawyer, a young lawyer. Now, when 1999 came, Ogbonna was asked not to run. Okwadike Ezefe was supposed to be the candidate of AD for South and South. At the Abuja conference, we were asked to step down. Udenta, who was secretary then, captured this very well. They asked to step down. Why? Because the nation figured out that there was an injury, which is the unfair, illegal stoppage of
Ambiola's presidency.
And that generated a lot of quote unquote alleged terrorism, the disaffection, even the Tinubus, the Fayemis were part of that army of agitators. And so the Nigerian political elite consensually said, we're going to have a Yoruba run for power as a way of appeasing. So my sense is this, that zoning, political zoning, should be an affirmative action. You deploy it rarely, only when there's a national perception of injury.
In the circumstance we find ourselves, do you believe therefore that affirmative action that the Southeast should benefit from it?
Yes, I believe that the only group, not South, I don't believe in a South zone that is fraudulent.
I mean the South.
Yes, I'm confident that any notion of zoning to the South is fraudulent because you don't zone. Zoning is not the right thing. A campaign should be open competition. But you only use affirmative action to address clear wrong. In the Nigerian structure now, I don't want to talk about the three major the tripod of Nigerian politics in terms of ethnic composition, because we know that there are too many 360 ethnic or more ethnic groups. But even in the geopolitical zone, in the South, the only people who have not held power is the Southeast. So affirmative action, zone as affirmative action will be to say Southeast have it. I'll give you an example of the analogy with Biden and the Supreme Court. Now, we all talk generally about diversity in the Supreme Court. But Biden says, when I look at the optics of the Supreme Court, I see only one missing point. That missing point is not the black race as a whole, male, female. It's the black woman. There is a black man. I can see him there. There's no black woman. I can see a Latino woman. So in that conception of American politicians, they think that the injury that needs to be addressed through affirmative action, the inequity that has to be addressed through affirmative action is singularly the Afro-American woman. And so he didn't say, in next appointment, we're going to look at those who are underrepresented. He said, no, that's one person who is not on that picture. So what I'm saying is that you should allow politics as open competition. But when we think we need to zone, whatever it calls zone.
We have found ourselves in the present circumstance.
And we want to zone, which is usually a consensual political discussion. The only place to zone is South, is no other place. So you can't say partition between North and South, there's something like that. In fact, the geographical divide called North and South is problematic. And I tell you why, for two reasons. One, if you are from Enugu State, if you are from, let's say, this place we buy banana, banana towards Enugu, Nsoka, what's it called? Obolafo. You are closer to a Benue man in terms of functional closeness than somebody across the bridge. Talk less of Southwest. Now, Benue is in North Central. That community, if you put a major hospital in that building, the person who access it is that poor woman who will cross with feet or on Okada and go there. Same for Kogi. So in a sense, really, North and South does not really capture the real existential issues around the Nigerian Federation. So if you say power should shift from North and South, they take it to Southwest that has done 8 years of presidency plus 8 years of vice president. You are not doing justice. So why shouldn't you go to North Central? What is really beneficial to a Southeasterner, that power is in the Southwest after 8 years of president. So if you make it open politics and the Southwesterner provides his credential and wins, it's fair than saying we are zoning to the South. So the argument is, if you want to zone, you must micro zone
to seem to have bought into.
Then you should go to Southeast. If you don't want Southeast, for PDP says, for example, we want to win election. I say zoning is not based on political strength. We don't zone. Zone as affirmative action is not based on political strength. So when Biden says, I'm going to give you the Supreme Court justice, black American woman, he didn't look at the census figures. It's not about how many they are. It's about a perception of a need for redress. So if we don't feel there's a need for redress, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? But if we feel that way, then numbers don't count. Again, if for any reason a party can't zone because they feel the argument is that it's a ruling party that should zone, that a party out of power wants to capture government. And I said, that's fine. But then you then have to structure what we call win-win, a shared power framework. That means you have to provide pre-election a structure that speaks to the Southeastern concern and say, look, whoever becomes president of Nigeria, apart from a notional vice president that may or may not go there, we are going to share this power this way. The Southeastern will be IG of police. The Southeastern will be Attorney General. We want to secure that fear of security. That's what a country does. Affirmative action. We are concerned that the Southeast youths are being killed and they are saying that the state is rigged against them. To give them assurance. So if we're not going to zone to them, but we want to create a national politics, we can now say that we want to win an election, therefore we're going to go to North or we're going to anywhere we think we're going to win. But we want to recreate that dynamism of shared power. And so this is not a case of the president being a nice guy and saying our opponent. No, it's a case of understanding, written, known that once we win power, as of right, not as of my benevolence, you get the Inspector General of Police, the top guy, a competent fellow who can do the job. But what that tells you is that there's no conspiracy against you, state policing force to destroy you people. You're going to get the Attorney General so that they don't sit back and say when people are conspiring to liquidate us, so that when we send the headsmen to come and kill our people, and when they are arrested, somebody in the Attorney General's office will write a nolle prosequi. So these are the assurance mechanisms that can be an alternative to a zoning. But if you're APC and you say, of course you have a Buhari as from the north, and therefore you will go to the south, you can't but go to the southeast. That's where you have to go. Because otherwise, you are abusing the logic of zoning. The zoning, there's no not south to zone in terms of functional, economic, social reality. What you're zoning is the geopolitical zone to address various kinds of deprivation. So when you move to the south, you locate southeast. When you come to the north, you locate north central or northeast. So you look at these as zones that have been excluded, and the exclusion for you is an injury. But in other places like in America, where exclusion into presidential office is not an injury because the system doesn't take its cue from the president. If it's a bidding now, if you want to set up a network, want to buy maybe Warner Brothers, like Discovery wants to buy CNN, they're not going to require any approval from anybody. So nobody cares. So zoning is not an issue in America. It's open politics. So my prayer is that we'll come to a point where our institutions are so faced from the influence of a president. And the answer to that is first restructuring. You have to create power at a level where it's productive. You have to give the people the power to produce economic goods and services, power to regulate themselves. And so that what comes to the federalized is actually what can be best done at that level. And that's a theory around public good. That how do you manage the public good? You manage it at the level where it's best managed. So if you're dealing with grid, national grid, electricity, the best area is either federal or state. It can't be done by local government by nature of the subject matter. If you're dealing with toilets in the rural area, if you're dealing with primary education, if you're dealing with healthcare and sanitation at the local level, it's not a federalized issue because it's more efficiently done from an economic point of view at the local level. And that's the logic for restructuring, and that will deflect so much concern around the presidency and all the powers and institutions that are under it.
Dr. Amadi, I think one of these days I'll come back to you for us to converse on the power, electricity. It's important to me because government after government has seen that electricity is Nigeria's development albatross. We're not going to move an inch until we get it done. But that's a conversation for another day. For today, I've been conversing with Dr. Sam Amadi. As I introduced him at the beginning, a lawyer, an activist, a social commentator, and a friend of the house. The issue has been Southeast presidency. In fact, let me be ethnic group specific. Igbo presidency. Why is it an issue? He says it is an issue because, in a sense, not producing the president gives them the psychology of the underdogs. It creates the psychology of the excluded. It creates the psychology of the denigrated. So, even if it is not real, even if those who have produced the president all this while have not had any development advantage over others, in a sense, by the Southeast not producing the president, they don't feel co-ownership of the nation. But Amadi, thank you for coming for the conversation.
Thank you very much.
This conversation never ends. Next Sunday, we still converse. And my name never changes. It remains Mwabueze Njoko. Good afternoon.